So besides Larry Wilson and those guys of the role models, do you have any other ones that you'd like to mention?
Well, I hope that the Lord guides me some. He's, a lot of people say I'm a Christian, but I am, and those who are understand the importance of Jesus in your life on a daily basis. At least he needs to be. Memo to me more than anybody else. But besides Larry, gosh, so many people have been so much help. So many people that elected officials, but appointed officials too. Sports-wise, I like to thank the secretaries. They are unfailingly helpful and so cooperative and so kind. And I know they have 14 other things to do besides deal with Greg, but they always take time to do that, and that's very helpful. And Tyler, I know as you're broadening your horizons, you're understanding that too. But athletic directors don't get near the credit they are due and get an awful lot of criticism they shouldn't get. And we see coaches, and they're wonderful women and men. And so are the athletic directors, because behind the scenes, they've had to change the schedule because of snow. They might have postponed an event 3 times. They're still trying to find a date that's acceptable to both schools, and they still have time for me. But I do want to thank the coaches, because they're helpful. And you've had a tough loss, and last thing you want to do is talk to Greg on the radio. But they always do, and with just a couple of exceptions. But but by and large, like 99% are just wonderful, and I really do appreciate that. Our local coaches, by and large, are a wonderful group of people. I try to remember that they have families, they have other obligations in addition to being a coach, and they are a huge help to Matt, to Dustin, to me, to all of us, and we certainly do appreciate that. And putting on my news director's hat really quickly, it's the same situation with elected officials. The thing you have to remember about elected officials, sometimes people see an elected official, and as soon as they get elected, then they're the enemy. Well, those politicians, blah, 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 blah. They're the same people, by and large, that they were before they got elected. They're still the people down the street from you. I'm going to vent here for a second.
No, it's fine. Go ahead.
The national elections, we get 60 and 70% voter turnout. We have a school board election, we get 15 or 20%. That makes no sense. School board members, they're the people that you can go down the street and say, what were you thinking making that kind of decision? Can't talk to President Trump. You can yell at your TV. You can yell at some congressman, but you're not going to see them. So why not pay the most attention to the people at the local level, because those are the people that you can really have an impact on, and like as not, they have the most impact on your life. So when it's time for a local election, get out and vote. And who knows, maybe it's time for you to run. Just a thought.
Who are some famous people you have interviewed?
Well, I interviewed Barack Obama when he was a senator. He was here in town for a town meeting out at the Keller Convention Center. And I heard him speak, and I thought it was worth a shot. So I said, Senator Obama, do you have time to talk? Well, he wanted to talk and meet and shake hands and all of that. But eventually he took time, and I remember we walked right down into the other end of the convention center and sat down, and him and me for 15 or 20 minutes. That was pretty cool. I see him on TV now, and I say, hey, I interviewed you. And talked to George W. Bush before he was president, too, when he was here campaigning for his dad. Tell you how old I am. When he was campaigning for his dad, like in 1988 or something like that. So those two people, some entertainers, a lot of people who've been at Effingham County Fair I've been blessed to get to talk to. And I still say, and if she's ever in the area, and she grew up in Southern Illinois, or has family down there, Barbara Mandrell. If you ever hear Barbara Mandrell singing Sleeping Single in a Double Bed or whatever, something like that, she was the best interview I ever did. She was so gracious. It had rained that night at the fair, she still went on. She danced, she sang, she played, about 1,114 instruments. She was funny, and still after the concert, when she had to be dog tired, she still talked to me, signed autographs, signed pictures, was kind and so helpful. And man, she was Entertainer of the Year then. That's when she was at the peak of her popularity. And for her to take time for me was pretty special. So all these years later, Barbara Mandrell, if some folks down in Southern Illinois, if you're listening, if you see this, let her know I still appreciate that all these years later. So many fun people and so many, that's the best part of the job though, Tyler. You know that surely by now, that it's the people you get to meet, that's the best part of the job. It's not the money you make, it's not the whatever, it's the people that you meet, because those are people that you can develop lifelong friendships with. And boy, that's hard to measure, hard to quantify just how much that's worth. Those are the things I remember.
There's some really nice people out there, but also the people that share their story is what gets people really involved in that kind of thing. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, you know it.
While sports broadcasting, how many different sports did you broadcast?
Well, let's see. Football and basketball, those are the two easy ones. Baseball and softball. Larry and I used to do a bowling tournament in Effingham.
Oh, man.
The Effingham Open. It was at the OK Bowl, and they had bowlers from, gosh, all over the Midwest come here. It was a big event, and we used to broadcast on the radio. Now, that was interesting, trying to broadcast bowling on the radio, but we did it. We used to do the Effingham County track meet, and that was well received because we had guys who were farming, and it was planting season when the track meet was going on, and they couldn't stop planting, so they listened to the track meet on the radio. You know, you're thinking, track, you can't see what's... I know. Back then you couldn't. Now we could video it, but back then it was just audio, so Larry and I did what we could to make it as special as we could. And so, gosh, what else have we done? Seems like we did one soccer match. I'm probably going to have to do more soccer one of these days. A lot of different things, and then other stuff along the way. But those are some of the sports. But football and basketball, baseball and softball and...
You can remember all this stuff.
Yeah, lots.
So we'll switch to, first of all, football. In football, name some outstanding teams.
Well, this past season's Hearts team was pretty special. What a great season. What a great bunch of guys, too. A lot of great young men that were part of that team. And Coach Hefner is a blast. He's fun. And all the success that Brett's having now, good for him. Because when the transition from Coach Mack to Brett occurred, you had two guys who had really good fundamental ideas and philosophies. Brett's is different than Mike's, and that doesn't mean one's better than the other. But Brett's done a wonderful job of instilling his program. And I remember we talked about that at the start, that the thing about his desire was to instill his program, which is good. A coach ought to believe in his program. And when the wins weren't there so readily those first couple of years, well, it was part of the changeover. And if you understood that, if you're a Cubs fan, you remember when Theo told us, well, this is going to take a few years, and then eventually the Cubs won the World Series. And eventually the Hearts have been in the playoffs, 4 years in a row now, and have gotten better and farther every year. Now, I told some of the guys that are back this year, I said, you know what that means for this year, and you got to win the state title. But
it's a pretty tall task.
It is a pretty tall task, but this football's so much fun. I have different philosophies about why every sport's as good as it is. In football, it's the fact that you prepare all week for Friday night. It's the one game in town, and that's one thing football has on the rest of the sports, is that Effingham is the only team, Cumberland, in the immediate area that has football. And so everybody in Altamont, everybody in T-Town, everybody in Cowton Herrick and wherever, they can all get behind the Hearts. They can all get behind that Effingham team. And for all the hoopla and all the sign making and face painting and window painting and all that stuff, and then it gets to Friday night. And then there's the game. Football has that on every other sport, that it's an event every time there's a football game. And you just can't sustain that in other sports because there are so many games. Again, each team has its own deal, but that's what it is about football for me. And people important to me played football too, so that makes it special.
Name some memorable football players.
Wow. I don't know where you start in 40-some years. That takes in a lot of territory, Tyler. This past season's bunch, it was fun with Shaq and Jet Gillum and some of those guys, and thankfully guys like Tristan Duncan and people like that are going to be back this year, so we're going to have a lot more fun this year. But
I agree.
But you know, Kevin Parker is a judge now, and everybody sees Judge Parker. I remember when he was a running back for the Hearts in the late 70s. He was a heck of a runner. If you see that, Kevin, you can thank me next time. Kurt Endebrock was a multi-sport star for Effingham, played football, basketball, and baseball. That's tough. All the Wolf brothers have been fun. But I'm leaving people out right and left. There's so many talented people. And all you linemen out there who never get any credit, especially the O-line, you're busy blocking and making somebody else look good. Thank you for doing that. Terrence Hill and, oh gosh, so many people that have made football exciting. And we were talking about the Newton-Effingham game a few years ago, just the other day. Anthony, who played for Newton and has gone on to Harvard and things like that.
Levi Richards.
Levi Richards, Anthony. His dad is Anthony.
Yes.
Sorry, generational thing. It'll happen to you, Tyler. Anyway, Levi, I remember he came up here from Newton, scored 6 touchdowns at Effingham. That was some game. There was no one left in Newton because they were all here at Klosterman Field.
Yeah.
It was crazy that night. So many great football players. Too many years. So for all you folks who I just left out, I apologize.
Levi Richards is the same age as my cousin Todd Bierman, who played at Newton. They were the team that went to state, lost to Addison Driscoll, and they played at the U of I. They were down 35-0 at the half. That's because how good that team was. And now that Addison Driscoll team doesn't even exist anymore.
So now when you want see now, Tyler doesn't have to interview himself because he's getting on my interview.
List some notable games.
Well, that Newton-Effingham game came to mind pretty quickly, didn't it? Some of football is the distances we've had to go to do a game. Yeesh. The Lightning Bowl, that was a fun night when we went to Mascoutah. We had Lightning in Mascoutah. We got through the first half, and it wasn't going well. We were losing, and had to go back and finish it on Saturday afternoon, and it was like night and day, literally. And Effingham came back and won that game. It was a remarkable turnaround. Now, the Hearts had the same thing in the playoffs a couple of years ago against Breeze Mater Dei. You'll remember, we started the game on Friday night, and we came back on Saturday afternoon, outscored them 20-0
That was
or something
last year,
like
yeah.
that. And came back and won that game. And that was a phenomenal win because of the nature of the game itself, but also the fact that the Hearts won at Breeze. That was big.
Which very rarely happens.
Psychologically, that was a great win for Effingham. And
that was a big win to catapult them to stardom. That was the first game of the season.
It was a
and then
springboard.
it was a Friday night. It rained out, so they came back the next day and played it. And all of a sudden, something just lit a bullet above their heads and like, let's go, we got this.
See what I just said.
So I know you talked about the coaches a little bit, but
think about
Yeah.
the last game last year.
Yeah.
The magnitude of that game, the fact that, and for my friends in the class of '80 who also made it to the semifinals, I love you too. But this game last year was just remarkable. Think about the implications of that. People all over the state were watching for how that game was going to come out. it was just colossal. And congratulations to coach and the guys for putting themselves in that position to have a chance to be in that game. And one kind of flaky play decided it. That's too bad. But I mean, think that ball went off hands how many times before it finally got caught. And oh well. But hey, it was great to be there, wasn't it?
Oh my gosh, the atmosphere! I've never seen so many people at a football game in high school football, even if it was just a regular season game or a playoff game. Incredible atmosphere, loud from start to finish. What are some of your favorite football fields to cover?
Favorites? Okay, Effingham. We have great facility, and I know that because of some of the places I've had to go. We have a great facility. Greenville had a nice facility. I remember that was early, back when Larry and I were just getting rolling. Well, I was just getting rolling. He was well established. Greenville had a great facility. Salem has a nice press box. I'm mostly thinking about places that aren't nice. Newton, when they redid Krzyzewski Field, that was a really nice press box. That was a good place to broadcast. By and large, schools do a good job of taking care of you.
Ending on football, any stories you'd like to share before we go on to the next sport?
Well, I think I focused on the fact that it's the game, and there's a game in a week, and everybody can get excited about it. That to me is what makes football a great ball game. I hope it's always a sport. I hope it always is.
So in basketball, name some outstanding teams in that.
This gets tougher because then you've got all kinds of schools, and I hate to leave anybody out. Effingham playing for the state championship is still my best memory. Effingham, Chicago Manly, big Chicago school. Russell Cross played in university and then later on went and played in the NBA. He was a ferocious ball player, great ball player. That was 1980. Mitch Arnold was on that team. Uwe Blopp was on that team. Dale Groupie and Jim Shadowins and Dallas Osborne and Steve Bushu and Brad Neat and Jeff. Let's see. Who else am I going to forget? Jeff Wolfer and Dave Oltman was a sophomore on that team. He'll want me to mention that. And and Ted Gravenhorst, and I can almost name the whole bench, but I can't quite get everybody. Donnie Deeker and gosh, so many people. But that was so David and Goliath like. It was for Effingham being the size we are and Chicago Manly, the size they were. That was a great ball game. And gosh, I hated it that we got beat. Oh man, it was. But to play for the state championship was pretty cool. And so many great boys and girls teams at Effingham since then. But T-Town, when people, it's been 35 years almost now, but think about 1986 when the boys and the girls won the state championship. It was phenomenal. And back then, the boys played first and then the girls, not like it is now. And for Kenny and for Dennis to win state championships the same season, that doesn't happen real often. You check the record book, that doesn't happen. And that was just a magical year for T-Town and for all of us, really, because boys and girls state championships the same season, hard to imagine. And it happened. It really did. I was there. I know it happened. And then other state championship teams. But, so many things, though. The 3 overtime game between Effingham and T-Town a few years ago, that was colossal.
I was at that, yep.
People had to be worn out by the time that game was over. It was, and for the extensions of the games, because of shots that were made that were unexpected, and it was just quite a night. Mike Walker, another friend who's down in St. Louis now, Mike was a coach and player in the area at Stu, and Mike and I, his first broadcast, we went to Paris to do Effingham and Paris boys, and we got there and we had a 5 overtime game. Five overtimes. And Mike says, well, it's going to be like this all the time. And of course it isn't. He knew that. He was just being funny. 5 overtimes. We've had 3 overtimes. We've had 2 overtimes. Lots of overtimes. But 5 overtimes. That was a crazy night. And so many cool things about basketball. And so many great players. And I know that's going to be the next question you ask me. Players.
You know it.
Players. How do you do that? How do you quantify that?
People tell me, before you add that part, people tell me all the time that Mitch Arnold is one of the best ever come out of Effingham County.
Well, I think Mitch, man, and you've had to rethink that every time somebody else comes along. But Mitch was such a great athlete. See, that's the thing. And he may be watching, so is, you know how that goes, Mitch. But he was such a tremendous basketball player, because he played before the 3-point arc. He'd hit that baseline jumper in the corner. He could have had another 500 points because he hit that shot all the time. He was a heck of a rebounder. Could have been your guard. Could have brought the ball up the floor. He was a good defender. He just, for my money, is the best that I've seen. And there are a lot of people, I think, that would still agree with that, even though we've had some wonderful ball players through the years. Mitch, for my money, is the best that I've seen now. Have there been a lot of other great ball players? Sure, you bet. And I'm thinking about going back to the Wolf family, who I mentioned earlier. I would suppose that that's probably the best family of athletes I've seen, because my mercy, especially basketball, they've just had so much ability. And Landon Wolf's the all-time leading scorer now, so how can I not include him, right? And he's playing college basketball, and he was a great football player. What a great senior year, man. But his brothers have and are doing great things. And then girl players, gosh, back to Doris Zaruza now, but Doris Carey, who said all kinds of, that was a national free throw shooting champ, and has the Carey clan and Zaruza and however many offshoots you got of that family. That's been a great group of athletes. But so many people and so many individuals. It'd be more fun to go through every school and find out who everybody thought was the best player at that school. And maybe there you go. If an AD's looking for something to do, right, they always are, have a contest about who was the best player at your school. That'll deflect some of it off of me.
That'll be interesting.
Oh, man. Because every school's had a great ball player. You know, you think about every school in the area, and I think about, like, Windsor. Who would you pick from Windsor? And you might think of one guy, but you could go back to the 50s. They had some great basketball teams. I don't remember them. I was barely born, but they did. And for people like, I remember Randy Mathis played at Windsor, and he was just a heck of an athlete. I don't know how you do that. I don't know how you decide who the best was. Teutopolis, of course, has had great boy and girl basketball players, and otherwise they wouldn't have had the success they've had. But they've had great coaches. That would be an interesting question too. Who's the best coach there's ever been in this area? I don't know. I got my ideas, but so do you. So that would be a fascinating thing to consider.
Something that a lot of people don't realize is how much time is being put in by the coach's point of view with the players. That is fascinating because of the practices, the scrimmages, not being able to be with your family. That's a big part of it.
Yeah, and they certainly get credit for it. And I think a lot of folks aren't staying in coaching anymore because of that.
Hmm.
And also because of the way they're treated. Sometimes we're pretty hard on our coaches. And they're by and large a great group of people. And next time you're going to yell something at them or be less than charitable, you might want to think about that because they're working off hard and giving up a lot of time with their family. Tyler's right about that. And that's something we all ought to remember. Officials. Let me say a word about officials.
Oh my gosh.
Officials get an awful lot of grief, and it's really too bad because I've also had a lot of friends who are officials, and they're fine folks, and they're good to their kids and treat their spouse right, and we need to give them a break. We need to be kind to our officials because who wants to get paid a certain amount of money to give up 6 hours probably every night by the time you get ready and go and all of that, and then you go home and you've been screamed at or booed or whatever? Hey, I can understand why a lot of people don't want any part of that. And we need to be thoughtful about that because we have, and I talk to officials about this. This isn't just Greg. Officials say, we're getting older, and a lot of guys are staying in it just because they don't see enough young guys ready to step in.
Mm-hmm.
And that's too bad. Shouldn't be that way. So encourage young officials and do what you can to support them. And maybe you're seeing this and maybe you're thinking, well, I want to stay involved in sports. Being an official is a great way to do that. So talk to somebody that you know that's an official during a halftime at a ball game or before or after the game. Talk to them and say, well, what do I need to do? How do I get involved? And they'll point you in the right direction. They'll help you out with that.
My dad, Carl Ripken, will be the perfect role model for that type of thing.
Carl's officiated for a long time, and sometimes you get encouraged and sometimes you don't get encouraged. And you get a whole lot more of the second than you do of the first. And you know what? The best compliment I ever hear of an official, for an official, is that when you don't notice who's the official, that means they've done their job.
Yeah.
That means they've done their job.
So we're going to wrap up on basketball, these last two questions, and then we'll do a couple questions with baseball, and then we'll finish up with the ending part.
Okay, I suppose we've gone 6 hours.
Oh, you're good. Perfect. Hey, you're doing a great job, Greg. What were some of your favorite gyms to do for basketball?
That's fun. The old Effingham gym's fun. That's a fun place because it's Cracker Box Palace. That goes back. That's a story that ought to get told. Effingham was playing Olney for the regional championship in 1979. And that was such an epic game because Olney had a great ball club. Ron Heron was a wonderful coach. Effingham had a great ball club. Jim Maxson was a wonderful coach. And you had these two guys going against each other. They probably won 1,500 games between them, or maybe that 1,200, 1,300, somewhere in there. Anyway, they won a lot of games. And Olney and Effingham were coming. And Effingham somehow, and whoever gets credit for this, thank you, got the regional that year. And we didn't have the largest facility, as many of you are aware, since it's now the junior high gym. And somebody, I won't say who, but I'm pretty sure I know who, said something about the fact that the Effingham gym was a cracker box. There was a song by George Harrison, who used to be with the Beatles and went on to lots of solo hits before he passed. And he had written a song called Cracker Box Palace. Well, people in Effingham were rightly offended by that remark. And so the Olney team, once they got to about, Newton on their way up, started seeing cracker boxes taped or nailed, in some cases, to trees, to signs, all along the road from Newton to Effingham. They saw cracker boxes because of that comment. And we probably played that song. We probably made it a hit at CRA because we played that song about, every 12 minutes, I think, that day before the game, because we just wanted to ingrain that in people that, that was a not probably good decision to say that. We had, I think, 2,000 people there that night.
Wow.
Now, the fire chief at the time was a kind person and didn't invoke the restrictions. And so everybody, people might have been hanging from the rafters literally, because it was just a phenomenal crowd. And that was that team that went to state and played for the state championship for Effingham. Only had Darnell Jones, who went on and played college ball, and lots of other great ball players. And it was an epic atmosphere. Mm-hmm. And of course, Effingham won and went on, like I said, and played for the title. But that was a huge game. That was such a fun game. Fun place to broadcast. We had lots of great. Larry talked about the false teeth mm-hmm. incident in his interview, so yes. I won't talk about that. But
How was it? That was interesting. Oh my God!
In case you missed it, you can rewind and find Larry's interview where it talks about the gentleman whose false teeth ended up out on the floor when he got upset about a call. So, but that's Larry's story, not mine. But so many great places. T-Town's a great place to come. We used to kid Crawford all the time about it was 8,000 degrees in there all the time. He turned it up to wear people out, and all. It just was the nature of the gym. I think, Ken, that was right. You didn't really do that, did you? But so many great places. Altamont has such a great basketball facility.
NTC tournament.
That big horseshoe and the stage and all the excitement, and yes, the NTC tournament. That is such a, I hope if we lose any other tournament, we never lose the NTC. That is such a great tournament. But we've had great tournaments here. That St. Anthony Thanksgiving tournament, I'm telling you, that may be the best Thanksgiving tournament in the state because of the schools that are there. And look at the work that's been done on the Effingham T-Town Christmas Classic. Look at the teams we're getting. We've had state championship teams and teams that have played for state there, players who've gone on to major college basketball, and the folks who've worked so hard to make that tournament go. And the fact that we don't have to drive an hour and a half or an hour and 15 minutes anymore. At Christmas time, we get to spend it with our families, at the ball game maybe, but we're spending it at home instead of having to go someplace else. All that revenue is coming to the communities. That's a great thing. So thanks to everybody who might be listening and watching who have worked on that tournament to make it the event that it is. So all those things. So Effingham and T-Town, St. Anthony's done a great job with the Enloe Center, and it's a fun place to go. Golf gym was pretty cool to do games too, though. That was pretty crazy. And some of the older Bulldogs that I know, they'll talk about that, about Greg and Larry being there doing games. It was such a blast. I'm really interested to see how it goes for moving the boys tournament back to the State mm-hmm. Farm Center. Because Larry and I, obviously when Effingham played up there and some of the T-Town early teams, they played at the Assembly Hall. State Farm Center. So I'm really interested because I'll admit I've liked Peoria. I think Peoria did a heck of a job. I made it fun for the families. I think it's farther.
Yeah, it's a little bit longer trip.
So that's the downside.
Cut it in half going to Champaign. Yeah.
Absolutely. And since Tom Grunlow may be watching, Grunlow Construction was one of the key builders of the renovation at the State Farm Center, and it's beautiful. So I'll be interested to see how it goes next year. But I enjoyed Peoria, and I'm glad that the girls' tournament's still going to be at Redbird because that's a blast. The people can come right down to the floor if they want to and sit, and thankfully we've been there with Lori and the girls a few times lately, so that's pretty cool too. And so, gosh, all kinds of facilities. Benton, I remember when the Benton gym got built, that thing was a palace. Nobody had anything like that back then. And it's still looking pretty good. Sheesh, 40 years later, is that right? Probably 40 years later. I'm getting old. Anyway, it's so many good things to consider.
So I'm going to wrap up on one more sport, and I'm going to put one question with it. Then we'll wrap up with the broadcasting part. I wanted to ask you about the baseball side of it real quick. For the Fleener brothers, Justin Fleener at T-Town and obviously won the state championship last year, and with this COVID situation, couldn't play this year.
Yeah.
And his brother Chris, who was the head coach at Effingham baseball, now at Fairfield.
Mm-hmm.
Talk about them as brothers and being able to coach against each other and just defend like that.
We did an interview with him about 3 or 4 years ago, which means it's probably been 10.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, it was so much fun. And the sibling rivalry when we were doing that interview was so much fun. But they love each other, and they respect each other, and they support and encourage each other. And that's a great thing to see. Justin has just had so much success at T-Town. I think that, I've always heard about the T-Town work ethic. And I think it's legitimate. They work really hard.
I played under Flinger.
Yeah, he's demanding, but I don't use that as a negative. He wants it. I think that every T-Town kid would leave school knowing they've done their best. That's a great thing, and that would be great as you grow to adulthood to know that, however, whether you hit 238 or whether you played twice or whether you played every game, if you knew you did your best, that's a great thing, because there's no time for regret once you're out of high school. So I think that's a great tribute to Justin, and he cares about his kids as people too. You can see that, and I see that. And one of the barometers for me as a kid and a coach is the number of people that I see come back and talk to the coach. There have been coaches through the years that every time they're at a game, regardless of sport, I'll see guys who played for them coming back and wanting to visit with them. And not just pal around, but that's the measure of respect that they have for those guys. And I love that. And I think that's a real good barometer. And you see that a lot with Justin and Chris. And it was so cool this last year that Justin had the team that went to state and Chris's team made it to the super sectional. And for both of those guys to have such a measure of success in the same season, that was pretty neat. And we wish Chris and his family all the best down in Fairfield. And in this strange year when certainly T-Town had another great team potentially and didn't get a chance to play, and all the teams, Altamont, I'm thinking about Altamont's had so much success in baseball, and Effingham should have had another really good team. And sorry Kern McNeely didn't get to start his season this year as baseball coach. And oh my gosh, the Windsor Stew Straw softball team should have been killer again this year. And you think about, and Michaela Walsh didn't get a start as softball coach at St. Anthony this spring.
Tipton.
And Crystal Tipton, her first year at T-Town. So you think about all those dynamics, and none of it happened. Darn it.
Yeah.
Shame on you, COVID-19. And, but.
Somehow we'll get through this.
Yeah, I think we're on the backside now. I hope.
I hope so.
I hope. And, baseball and softball are so much fun. I dearly miss the city series. That is so much fun. Effingham and St. Anthony, 3 games of softball, 3 games of baseball. It seems like 1 million people have probably been to those city series through the years, and all the bunch that sits out beyond the outfield fence at Paul Smith and singing the anthem and singing "Take Me Out the Ball Game," and that's been so much fun for me through the years. And man, it's been over 40 years now since the city series started in baseball, and 25 years I think for softball, something like that. So it's cool. But all these memories and all these people, and I apologize again to all the people that I should have apologized. I'm going to see this and I'm going to think, I didn't, because you do that.
Since you started in radio, Greg, how has the broadcasting world changed?
Lots, night and day. When you started in radio, when I did in the 70s, you wanted to be on AM because all the big stations were on AM. Now everybody's on FM. AM stations, sometimes if they lose their license, they don't even get renewed. It just vanishes. That's a terrible thing. Technologically, though, it's amazing. We don't use records. You can use them at home if you have a nice turntable, but we don't do that now. And we went through 8-tracks and cassettes, and then CDs. It got a whole lot better, and now everything's on computer. and that's why it sounds so good. But yeah, night and day. It's phenomenal the changes that have been occurring. Now, some of the changes that are bad is because you can do so much more technologically. It means less jobs. That's too bad. But live news and live sports isn't going to go away.
Mm-hmm.
There's always a niche for that.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm glad that I had the opportunity way back at the start when I wanted to be a rock and roll DJ, because everybody wanted to be. People turned me toward news, and Larry gave me an opportunity to help him in sports. And because all these years later, that's still around. And I'm thankful for that.
What advice would you give to a beginner in the broadcasting field?
Read and write. Read and write. Read and write. You have to be able to speak well, read well, and write well. And I don't care, we don't do much longhand anymore. Thanks teachers who teach cursive, by the way. But you have to be able to do that, because if the computer goes south, you may have to write something on a piece of paper. Hopefully you can find a pen or a pencil. And reading and writing, because if you can't make yourself understood, it doesn't make any difference how good a story you have if you can't tell it. What's that mean? People have talked about the fact that grandparents need to share with their grandchildren stories from their childhood so they understand how things were. That's a key to me, that communication is so important. And let's bring it back to sports. Some of you love a game, but part of the fun's talking about the game after the game. And you share these great memories about, can you believe that shot? I can't believe that. Did you see how far that home run went? I mean, all those things, that's all communication. That's all passing along information from one to another. And in this wonderful country in which we live, where you get to express your opinions freely and openly, then that's another thing that makes sports so cool, is that I may never have been a good athlete, and I wasn't, but I still get to talk about sports. And so do you. You stop me and say, Greg, can you believe that? You know, or whatever. Whatever the story. It's not necessarily a story, it's the story. And that's a great thing about communications.
What has broadcasting done to change your life?
Well, I was pretty introverted as a kid. Really introverted as a kid. And being in communications has brought me somewhat out of my shell. And I'm thankful for that. And maybe that's the biggest thing. Maybe that's the biggest thing. And I think about how less rich my life would have been if I hadn't had the opportunities I've had.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
It's been a great blessing.
You do a phenomenal job, Greg, and a lot of people in this area respect how much time you put into your job. I wanted to ask you real quick, how long have you been here at Premier Broadcasting?
Well, Premier Broadcasting went on January 3rd, 1994.
Holy cow.
And we started getting ready for the changeover in October of 93 to go on the air in January of 94. I don't recommend the 2-month thing. I might try a little longer. Just an aside. But that's been a blast, and I appreciate the opportunity Dave allowed me to come over here and be a part of things from the ground up at Premier. That's been pretty cool. And from 1994 to now, you can do the math. Hopefully I get to stick around a little longer.
Tell me real quick about everybody you work with here. You guys are all friends and you guys get along so well. What's your favorite part about working in this studio?
Oh my, we're a family, and sometimes dysfunctional, but often complimentary. And everybody has such a part to play. The sales team, obviously, if they don't have success, if there's no money, we can't work, or we work for free. neither is is a real good choice. Yeah. So thanks to them, and then Teresa and Millie for working on the business end of things, and Dave. I talk about this at the end of every season. Dave's commitment to local radio, to local news, to local sports, things like that. There are two ways to operate in a business, right? You make more money or you spend less. Well, Dave's willing to make investments where it's needed to make sure we have a quality product, and that's pretty cool. Tanya, too, as Vice President of Operations, does a wonderful job. Then you got the people on air, because those are usually the folks you know first at a radio station. It's people that you hear every day. So for all the folks who are on the middays, for all the people on the morning show, all the people on the drive home, people on the weekends, people who run the NASCAR races, some of whom are the same people, it's a great team. And you've got somebody like Doc, who I've worked with for 40 some years, to BD and people like that who've been around a year or two. It's a great family. We have divergent opinions. We have different personalities. We feel differently about political things and whatever. But it's a family. And you know what? Last time I went to a reunion, I heard the same thing. The same divergence of opinion, the same things. And you know what? We still love them.
Is there anything else closing up you want to share, Greg?
Thanks for listening. And thanks for supporting local sports and local news and local radio. And thank you, Tyler.
Thank you for sharing your story, Greg. This is Greg Sapp, the premier broadcasting, the legend, the radio announcer.
Means I'm old.
Thank you, Greg.
Thanks.